ASU men's basketball has had a tough stretch of games, and we're recapping them all on today's episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Pac-12 podcast. Thanks for making this your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. I'm your host, Cindy Robinson. Joining me today is Conner Dreos from Locked On Sun Devils. I always feel like get that little tongue twisted. Conner, we have not chatted in a minute, and there's a lot to catch up on, mainly ASU men's basketball. I will say this. We talked about the tough stretch ahead for them prior to it starting, and while not everything turned out the way they would want to, for sure, there was definitely some exciting moments for the team, and even some positive moments to look forward to and for them to still kind of work off of. So let's get started with, I guess, what was the toughest game that they started with? I want to see where the stretch started.
Take your pick. Oh, you're talking the last five. Well, the last 5 games that they've played, it was they got USC twice, Arizona twice, and UCLA. They do have Stanford coming up, I think.
Yeah, let's go with that.
But the last 5 games, the powers that be decided that ASU, being such a great basketball team, needed to be challenged a little bit more than they have this season, because putting the ball in the hoop was already a big challenge for them. Doing it against some of the better teams in the nation was making it a little bit tougher. So what I will say, and this is not a homerish take, like go back and just watch some of these games, right? ASU was playing a lot of these teams tough, but it was more so like they played well in the first half and absolutely just crumbled in the second half. I think the biggest example of that would be that first game against USC. I don't remember if they were leading or if they were tied going into the half, but ultimately they got absolutely rocked in the second half. We're seeing this, essentially the trend over and over and over, where it feels like they're putting a lot on DJ Horn's shoulders, where to be the guy night in and night out, and as of late struggling a little bit. We're kind of seeing that from the rest of the team as well, that if Horn does not play well, the team truly does not feel like they can compete. Now we are getting some good play from people like Marion Jackson, who is a transfer coming into the season. He's played very well as of late, as well as guys like Jalen Graham or Kamani Lawrence, who's been mainstays in this team, or this offense, I should say, the entire season. But they can't seem to find a way to play a complete game of basketball short of UCLA, right? Short of UCLA. And even then, UCLA honestly did not play their best basketball game that day. Overall, they didn't shoot very well, at least not to start. They got a little bit better in that second half. But everything kind of has to go ASU's way in order for them to get that kind of a victory, in the sense that they had to go to triple overtime to beat UCLA. And it's not so much that our expectations were that they should blow them out of the water or that they were going to win the game. But if things do not go perfectly, it feels like for ASU, it just doesn't feel like they're going to win, right? So for that game against UCLA, they shot less than 23% from deep. 23%, right? That's bad for ASU standards, because we're shooting at about a 28 or 9% clip this year. Shot 37% from the field, not absolutely terrible, but certainly not what UCLA is used to. Versus ASU in that game, shot 34% from deep, which is above their average, 40% as a team. It just, unless things seem to go, again, everything ASU's way, it's not going to be a complete basketball game. And that was seen in the game against Arizona. Against U of A, they got off to a 14-1 start, I think. I actually got that game a little bit late because I was coming home, and I turned on the TV and my jaw literally dropped. I'm like, am I on the wrong channel? Is this a repeat of a previous game? Like, there's no way ASU is doing this against the number 4 team in the nation right after beating UCLA. Right when I turned on the game, and I put a little bit of the blame on myself, U of A went on an 11-0 run immediately from that point. Immediately. So
Well, what it seems like more than anything is that they're not finishing a game complete, like you said. And then on top of that, one of the things we all pointed out, you, me, and Richie, from the beginning was that for them to be successful this season, it's going to take a collective effort. There's not really
mhm,
the superstar of the team. They were going to need everyone to step up. And so when you're leaving it all on one person, I mean, I always say this period, basketball is a team sport. Yeah, it's
sure.
cool to have your superstar, but you're still going to need efforts from everybody. And ASU is for sure one of those teams that need the collective effort. And so if that's not happening, that's where they're lacking. So I think if they were able to incorporate that more, they would see better second halves of games.
Couldn't agree more. It just they don't they don't seem to have those kinds of guys. Like maybe some people on specific nights, maybe
Yeah.
they can play that well, but they just outside of Horn, it's almost like take your pick of who's going to play well behind him. Again,
Right.
Marion Jackson has played better as of late over like the last 2 weeks. He's really seemed to hit his stride. Had a career game, I think it was against U of A, dropped 24, which kept them in that game. Maybe it was
Right.
against UCLA. Either way, one of those games, Marion Jackson played absolutely out of his mind to help ASU in that game specifically. But without that star, it's tough to compete with the rest of the Pac-12, right? People make fun of the Pac-12. It may not be the conference champion, just like everyone wanna make it out to be. But in basketball, they got some
That
really quality teams, and ASU is
yeah.
just not one of them. And to be
Yeah.
honest, if we put it into tiers, right? You've got your like let's almost call it your elite three, even though I think Oregon is above. I think Oregon's above USC in the standings right now.
Yeah.
But
Because
either
they
way, you've
definitely
got
beat them.
Arizona. Yeah, you've got UCLA, Arizona, and USC, which just kind of feel like the cream of the crop. And you've got some other quality programs, Oregon probably being right after them. ASU
Mhm.
is probably the best of the worst group, but you really only got a handful of schools in the Pac-12 that really are not what feel like competent basketball teams.
Right.
Unfortunately, ASU just seems to be one of them. So, uh, Richie and I, we keep having discussions of like what is going to be a successful season for us, right? What do we at the end of the year? What is going to be a great year for us? And at this point, we're talking about just being at that 500 level, right?
Yeah.
That game against UCLA was our NCAA tournament. That was our championship. That was unfortunately like it feels like in that game we will have peaked, right?
Yeah.
The rest of the way, we only get UCLA one more time, which was rescheduled to February 21st.
Yeah. Well,
Other
hold on.
than that, they don't.
I'm gonna have us talk about the rest of the schedule coming up next, just so that we can, because it's like some good games there that Arizona State could actually win and boost up their record to finish at that 500 level. So we'll talk about that coming up next.
Sure.
BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks. Or actually, this week. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports, scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up to the minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is where the game starts. It's Super Week brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. Okay, so right before we, left off, want to talk about the rest of that schedule because we saw Arizona State go through that tough stretch of ranked games, facing most of their toughest opponents that they're going to see this season, getting them out the way in a sense, back to back, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. So now looking forward to their schedule, the toughest opponent, like you said, would be UCLA. Although they did fall short against Colorado, was it? Yeah, against Colorado earlier this season. I think these are all games left behind that they're able to take home a win, or at least can be competitive enough to fight for a win. So still on their schedule, they have UW, Washington State, Oregon. That might be a tough one for them because Oregon is, like we said, one
Sure.
of the better teams of the Pac-12. And then Oregon State, Colorado, in Utah, and then Cal and Stanford again. So out of those, there are some tougher, I don't even want to say tougher, just competitive games that, will be Not an easy win for ASU, but they are winnable. For you, if they were to able to somehow win out the rest of the season, would that be I guess that obviously would be a confidence booster going into the Pac-12 tournament. Do you feel like they're going to be able to be competitive in the Pac-12 tournament?
Who do they get in the first round? I think that's probably my biggest question, because as of right now, they're probably looking at like an Oregon, right?
Yeah.
If they were to go into it.
Yeah.
So, which they did beat Oregon in Eugene, but that was a competitive game for ASU, but Oregon had the ball, I think, on the last possession, and Oregon just so happened to miss their shot, I think.
Okay.
If I remember that game correctly. So,
but if they can win in Eugene, they can definitely win in Tempe, because I've competed in Eugene and it's a different atmosphere for all their sports.
You would think, but ASU does the opposite of what you would think they could do all the time. Winnable game? They're going to get blown out. Game against UCLA? Apparently they're just going to shock the world.
Yeah.
Now, every game remaining on the schedule, there's some that are more difficult than others. That being said, I shouldn't say some teams scare me more than others, because this ASU team is unpredictable, and I mean that in the worst way possible. Exactly from what I was just saying before. They could take advantage of an Oregon State, a Utah, or a Cal, who they're all currently ahead of. They could, but it's asking a lot. Use the word win out a little bit ago. Rich and I have kind of like played that scenario in our heads. Well, if they just start winning games from here, if they can just go on this stretch here, and it doesn't feel like it's going to happen. Now, again, there's not a game other than UCLA, I think, that I look at in the schedule, which just thinks that I just think it's going to be a guaranteed loss. That being said, ASU has to, like, let's say they've got 9 games left. They probably have to go at least, 7-2? Well, honestly, seriously, like a 7-2 for me to have any sort of confidence. If they go like a 6-3, yeah, it was nice, but maybe half those wins came against some not so great teams in the Pac-12, and maybe the rest of their wins weren't against like the most quality opponents. They didn't beat an Oregon or a UCLA. Like things change, right? This is a long season. There's a lot of times for our opinions to go up or down about this team. But as of right now, we're trying to stay even keel about ASU going forward. It kind of is what it is about this season, right? I'm very curious what they do going forward with their coaching staff and Bobby Hurley. Yeah. But the last season and a half really just has not gone ASU's way. Rich and I were talking, I think, earlier this week. I think it was last year with the COVID season. A lot of things did not go our way, right?
Yeah.
But you can say the same thing about a lot of teams. Games getting canceled due to COVID, players getting sick, whatever that might be. Last year, a lot of people thought ASU could have been a tournament team, maybe even like a top 32 kind of team. Like that, the talent was there, and they absolutely just fell flat on their face. So with this program going forward, the last 9 remaining games, I wouldn't count them out of almost any of them. That being said, am I going to pick them as a winner in a ton of them, or even to cover the spread? We'll see. We're going to take it game by game, because the way this ASU team plays, everything it feels like they can turn things on at the flip of a switch.
Yeah.
But they don't know where that switch is, right?
Yeah.
They sometimes hit it luckily, it feels like, but until they can find a way to play together as a team, they find that depth behind DJ Horn. I'm not going to have the confidence in this team moving forward. They've got a couple of nice players, and that's it.
Yeah, I am interested to, like you said, to see what happens with the coaching staff, because something Michael Luke and I talked about, like during the off season or leading up into the season, was how he feels just like the coaching staff is just not the staff to make this team better. They're not helping improve the team. And more than anything, it's less that there's not the talent there and more that the coaching is not able to take them to the next level. So I'm trying to remember, how many seasons has it been that he's been there now?
6 or 7 at least.
Yeah.
So I have an odd goal. Is it okay if I talk about that now?
Go ahead.
For ASU, I almost want a coach so badly that is so good at his job that a Kentucky wants him, that a Kansas wants him. Like somebody wants to come take him from ASU because he's that damn good at his job. Yeah. And it just doesn't feel like they've had that guy in a very, very long time. I will say, like early on in Bobby Hurley's tenure, it felt like that could have happened where someone could have came knocking on his door a little bit saying, hey, he's doing a pretty good job with ASU. Maybe this is a guy we want. And since then, like he's got a couple 21 seasons under his belt here. It's not like he's been this absolutely terrible coach, but has not taken them, just like you and Luke were talking about, has not taken them to that next step. Certainly not one of the better teams in the Pac-12. And it it feels like it's run its course at this point, and I'm curious what the next change is going to be.
Yeah, it might be time just to have a whole refresher there, right? And having coaches like that are wanted by other teams, it's automatically clear that they're coaches. Uh-oh. It's okay. The dog agrees. See? But it's pretty clear that like they would be the game changer and exactly what you need on a team that kind of has been in a dull space when it comes to, actual success. And wanting to see that success, you need someone to just like, okay, we're going to come in, rip everything up and start fresh and give you guys a whole new game plan here to really change the dynamic of the team and what ASU basketball is known for in a sense. I would love to see that just because it's kind of been the same even keel, situation that we've seen year in and year out. And it may be time for something new. So I think it's fair to say that Bobby Hurley might be on a hot seat going into the rest of this season. But I think it's also safe to say that if they end up winning more of these games that are left over, he won't be going anywhere.
Sure. But again, if they make, and we're talking about going on a run again, it's just, it's not very realistic. If they make some noise in the Pac-12 tournament, okay, that's realistically their only shot at the NCAA tournament is they have to go far and almost win the whole thing. But in his tenure, he's won one NCAA tournament game. It was a playing game. It kind of doesn't count, right? Like
it counts. It counts.
It's almost like in baseball, winning that playing game during the to get into the wild card round. Like, were you really in the playoffs if you lost that game?
Yeah,
That's kind of where we have the bar at ASU right now, right? And it needs to be set much higher, and I just don't think that this coaching staff has the ability to get that done.
All right. Well, we have plenty of games left before we hit March Madness and Pac-12 tourney and NCAA. So we're not going to give up on them just yet, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on how they progress through the rest of the season. Coming up next, Conner and I are going to switch gears and talk a little ASU football and what's been going on over there as of lately. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could ever need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Okay, so it's been a minute that we've talked ASU football, and I know that at this point in time, still waiting to hear exactly what's going to happen with the whole sanctions and all of that stuff. I do feel like we've seen a little bit of development as far as the previous coaches situation that's happened. We've had coaches resign since then. Am I wrong there? It's been a lot that I've been reading.
Yeah, within about a matter of like a week, we had the 3 coaches placed on paid leave for the entire season, which I think was their DB coach, the tight ends coach, and like on the last one. Yeah. So they were all let go by the school. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, and Rich and I have had a conversation about this, Antonio Pierce was kind of known to be like the head of the snake that is this sanctions violations that they're going through, because he was kind of the head of the recruiting process.
Yeah.
Yet he was able to coach this last year.
All season, yes.
We might talk about the Sun Devils a lot, but ultimately we're still the general public. We don't have all that information as far as what's going on right now. So very interesting that he was still able to coach. That being said, both him and Zach Hill also resigned within a matter of a couple days. So now we're looking for essentially what would have been 2 coordinator positions, which we've already filled one of them, right? Glenn Thomas being the offensive coordinator I think you had mentioned you talked with Richie a little bit about Brian Billick being that offensive consultant. I don't remember exactly what his title is, but kind of filling in the same role as Marvin Lewis on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Glenn Thomas is interesting. I think he spent the last 2 seasons at UNLV. Most notably in his career, though, he spent, I think, like 8 or 9 seasons or so with the Falcons, partly as the quarterback coach, and then some time, I think, as the OC for the Falcons, spending some time with Matt Ryan. So he's got more NFL experience, which is kind of what this coaching staff is filled up with. Is that a good thing? Maybe, because they can't seem to get over that 8-win mark, it feels like, for the most part. But you've had a big change in that coaching staff position overall, right? Offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, supporting roles. It feels like on the defensive side of the ball, from what I understand so far, they're going to be hiring internally to fill that role. But no official announcement has been made as of yet. But it's kind of make it or break it season for Herm Edwards. I almost feel bad for some of the other coaches getting hired, because what happens if we get we find out the penalty for these violations coming out maybe over the summer? Something happens to Herm Edwards, and now this ship is without its captain for the remainder of the season. They kind of have to scramble to fill that spot, right?
Which is kind of what we were, I won't say anticipating happening this weekend, but we thought, this past season, but we kind of thought that was going to be a possibility that could shake up the team. It ended up not happening, but I think it is something that they constantly have to prepare for, which may be the reason why a Brian Billick is being brought in, because someone like that with the veteran status and will probably have to step up in that role. And it's like bringing them in as early as you can to get acquainted with the team, comfortable with the team, and have that chemistry for if something like that were to happen. I think it's very clear that most people are looking at Herm Edwards as probably the hottest seat in Pac-12 coaching right now. Other than him, there's so many teams that are rebuilding and, have new coaches that may have a little pressure on them to perform, but not in a position where like it's going to be a one and done thing for them. And I think that if I'm just going over the coaches in my head right now, he has to be the one that has the most pressure on him, because one wrong move, it's like, you're out of here. Mind you, with the looming idea that you could possibly lose your job at any point because of these implications that, are still sitting here waiting to be heard.
Agreed. It's not so much about poor performance, right? He's been okay as the ASU head coach, not like they're one of the best teams in the Pac-12, but they certainly are not bottom dwellers. But that being said, I think it's a good point that Billick is here now to spend however long with this team to kind of get acquainted with everybody as a just-in-case option. Now, the school's been very adamant about Herm is the coach. He is our guy. He's not going anywhere. But it feels like they're just kind of backing that up because they have to, right?
Yeah, Herm, you got to double down on your decision.
I think it was after the U of A game, or maybe it was the day after, whatever it might have been. But he basically said, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be the coach. Like he said himself, not Ray Anderson, the athletic director. He came out and said, I will be the coach of the team this next year, which was kind of bold to say. So, but with the NCAA, like quick is relative, right? Coming to a quick decision on these sanction violations, that can mean 2 years for all we know.
Facts.
Seriously, like it takes time to get all the information, which I get, but we have no idea when to expect it. We don't.
Yeah.
So a lot of time between now and this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and ultimately that ends up affecting your recruiting, because no one knows what's to come, and no one really wants to be stuck in a situation that had nothing to do with them as athletes, right? Coming in, you're just kind of having that, they could end up not being able to be eligible for a bowl game for the next 2 years. That's half of my season if I'm half of my career if I'm a freshman coming in. Like, I wouldn't necessarily want to be a part of that, So I didn't get to talk to you guys about National Signing Day. We may have to bring that up next week.
There was a National Signing Day? No one invited us. We got transfer portal kids. We got like I'm trying to remember, we got one high school kid on National Signing Day. It really was not that big of a deal for us. And to the point that you just made, it affects our recruiting, right? Mm-hmm. For any kid with any talent, potential, whatever that might be, wanting to make a decision coming to ASU.
Right.
Why would he want to come here? And we saw that through a lot of people leaving, losing Chip Trayanum to Ohio State, losing Tommy Hill, one of our corners who were going to need corners going into the season, losing both Jack Jones and Chase Lucas.
Right.
We have had a lot of transfer portal players, which was not a huge surprise, but this was a terrible recruiting class by even ASU standards.
Yeah.
It's not like they're recruiting 4 and 5-star kids regularly, but this was a absolutely horrible class in terms of overall potential. And by and large, it's because of these sanction violations, right?
Yeah.
So it's playing a massive impact on us right now. It's going to be affecting us in the future, and who knows how much longer that's going to impact us.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's still a lot to look forward to this offseason for ASU football. Hopefully, the sanctions come sooner rather than later so that we know what they're dealing with ahead of the season. But if not, Herm is still your coach, and we're going to see the development of the team. Jaden Daniels is still the quarterback. And yeah, you just got to be as optimistic as you can.
I'll be a Herm Edwards fan as long as I can. We did get Rachaad White on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yes,
and
yes.
The word that he used to describe Herm Edwards was he called him a sensei.
Okay.
So that was interesting. He said there were no other senseis in the Pac-12. So again, his words, not mine. But
I mean, I guess it's fair to say Herm has a background that would inspire some student athletes and would love to be coached by him because of where he comes from. So that
Sure.
I won't take away from him and his background and experience. No way. But thank you so much, Conner, for joining us. You guys can go check out Conner on Locked On Sun Devils, along with his co-host Richie Bradshaw on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. If you didn't listen to that episode where they interviewed Rachaad White, make sure you go check it out. It's up there on the podcast page.
And YouTube.
And YouTube. There you go. They are on YouTube now. So go ahead and make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe to Locked On Pac-12 podcast on YouTube and Locked On Sun Devils podcast on YouTube. And then follow along on Twitter at LO_Sun Devils and LO_Pac-12. Other than that, continue to make this your first listen every day. You can make the Sun Devils one of your second listens every day. And
one
then
of the second listen. The second listen.
Okay. Then make your third listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Continue to stay locked on Pac-12 on the Locked On Network.